In today's video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to create details using colored pencils over top of watercolor. Be sure to like the video and subscribe for more art-related videos, and let's get right into it. So I'm coming in with watercolors to do the base layer on this cake. Now this is a rainbow cake, so I'm choosing to use some brighter colors because I want the colors in my cake to be nice and bright. However, you can use whatever colors you want. Now, because I'll be coming over with the colored pencils, I can keep my line art a little bit darker than I normally would if I was coming back over with the watercolors to create the details. So you will see just how dark my line art is, and that's okay because the colored pencils are more opaque than the watercolor, so it will cover up those details. To make this tutorial as easy as possible, I'm just coming in with a flat wash of each of the colors. I do end up dropping just a little bit of burnt sienna into the edge of the cake, just because I can see a little bit of that more like brown cake texture there. But for all of the areas that we're using watercolor, I'm just doing a simple flat wash, and that way anybody can follow along with this, even if you don't like to blend with watercolor, doing wet on wet. This is just a very simple technique. Now, I do want to make sure that my colors are dark enough on the paper so that when I come over with my white colored pencil, that will show up. But I don't want it so dark that my darker detailed pencils won't show up either. So I'm looking for a mid-tone color here just for the base layer in this cake. And then I go in using my buff titanium. Now, I did show over on my Patreon how to mix up buff titanium if you don't have this color. It is just a convenience color, but it is a good color for icing on cakes or cupcakes or anything like that. It's just a bit of an off-white color. Now, the light source is coming from the left-hand side of the cake, so I want to make sure I end up getting the shadows on the right side of the cake as dark as possible before I come in with my colored pencils. Colored pencils goes great over top of watercolor, but watercolor won't stick over top of colored pencil. So I want to make sure I'm done with all of the watercolor portion before I come in with the colored pencils. And I'm using the watercolors just to start doing a soft gradient at the bottom, a little bit of a shadow underneath the cake, but I will come back in with my colored pencils and make that a little bit more defined. Now I'm starting to come in with the colored pencils, and I'm just really defining that icing. I wanted the icing on the top and bottom of the cake to stand out from the white icing. And I do come in with a little bit of my odorless mineral spirits just to blend those areas out. Now, odorless mineral spirits goes over watercolor just nicely. It won't disturb the watercolor underneath as long as the watercolor is completely dry. So if you're finding your colored pencils aren't coming out smooth, depending what paper you're using, you can always come in with your odorless mineral spirits and just blend those out a little bit. Now I am using a hot pressed watercolor paper here because I want a smooth texture with my pencils. I don't want that bumpy look showing up through. And this technique works great on hot pressed paper. You could also use cold pressed paper for this, but you will get a little bit more of that paper texture showing through once you apply the colored pencils. Now, to create some of that detail in the cake, I'm just coming in and creating little random shapes, and the ones that are in the middle are a little bit more lighter, and the ones towards the edges of the icing are a little bit darker. But I just want to make sure these are odd shapes and they're spaced out more randomly. I don't want them to look too uniform. And then I'll come in with a darker pencil once I get most of the shapes in, and I can darken up a few of the little edges to make it look like those little cake texture craters are a little bit deeper in some areas. Now I want to get most of the little main cake texture areas in right now, but I will come back after and add a few little smaller dots and dashes and squiggles just to add a little bit more texture in there. And I want to make sure I'm keeping my darkest areas right under the icing because that's where it would be more shadowed, and a little bit more on the right hand side because of where our light source is coming from. Now when I want to come in with more details like this and I don't want to blend out my first layer, I'll choose a harder pencil like my polychromos because those will sharpen to such a fine point and it'll stay fine like that, so I can get all these little tiny details in there. Those are the pencils I would choose for a project like this. Now, if you wanted to complete the base layers with colored pencils, that's when I would choose my more waxy pencils like Prismacolor or Caran d'Ache Luminance, just because they'll lay down a little bit smoother and blend out a little bit nicer, especially if you're going to go in with the OMS to blend. And I'm just using those same colors that I used in the blue part of the cake and on the icing area, just to create a deeper shadow underneath the cake and underneath the icing area, so it'll blend out from the colored pencils into the watercolor area that we put down. Now I'm coming in with my white Prismacolor, and I'm going to go ahead and add some highlights to our cake area. I'm choosing the Prismacolor because it is a bit more wax-based and more opaque, so it'll stand out better. However, if you're finding your white colored pencils aren't standing out enough for you, you could always come in with the brush and pencil touch-up texture and titanium white. That is a mixture that you mix together, and it creates an opaque white that you can paint over top of colored pencils. This is the only mixture that I know of that is archival to go over colored pencils. If you don't care about the archivalness of your artwork, if you're not selling it, then go ahead and use whatever you want. If you want to put gouache over it, white gel pen if you just want to create something pretty to look at. But if you are selling your artwork, then it is important to realize that those other mediums won't stick over colored pencil long term. Now, because we used a watercolor base here, before you even come in with your colored pencils, you could always take P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White or a white gouache and come in and put those highlights in first before we come in with our colored pencil details, and then you're just going to work around those highlights that you put in with the colored pencils. So that's another option there. Doing that will keep your artwork archival still, because the colored pencils can go over top of any water-based mediums. Just be mindful, if you're pushing really hard with your colored pencil over top of the gouache or the P.H. Martin's, it will chip it off. Whereas the brush and pencil products, I find going over top of it with colored pencil doesn't chip it off unless you're pushing really, really hard. And that's another bonus of using the brush and pencil products. You can color right over it with your colored pencils. So if you need to tint an area, or if you need a bright color over a darker color, you can put the brush and pencil products down first and then come over top of it with whatever color you need with your colored pencils. If you're interested in the real-time version of this, I will go ahead and link my Patreon down below. I post a new video every week, and you get access to all of my old videos as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I would love it if you could give the video a like and subscribe. It really helps my channel out. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.